First he lost his hairline. How you lose this? It's bad, Buck. It's bad. Live on Sunday. I need that money by Monday.
50 never paid nothing that I didn't have to pay back. So even though, yeah, he did help, I still had to give him that money back.
50 helped Young Buck more than anybody.
But that's still helpful.
That's still very helpful, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't know what to do.
And Buck, I think that's over. I think that's done, but
What do you mean?
I think his career is finished.
That line from 50 Cent didn't just hit hard, it sliced straight through the whole story. Because not long after, Young Buck's world fell apart right in front of everybody's eyes. The bankruptcy filings, the IRS heat, the probation drama, the jail time, it all stacked up like a nightmare nobody saw coming. But the truth behind how it all spiraled, way darker, way deeper, and way more twisted than fans ever imagined. From the streets to the spotlight, Buck's path was never smooth, and his come-up shaped everything that exploded later. Growing up in Nashville, Tennessee, young David Brown didn't have anything close to a soft childhood. He bounced from North Nashville's Seafright to South Nashville's J.C. Napier projects, then into the South 7th homes. Moving so much it felt like the city raised him instead of one neighborhood. By 8 years old, Shorty already knew every block, every alley, every energy across Nashville, learning the rules of survival before he even knew the rules of school. To keep the lights on and bring something home, Buck stayed grinding in every clean hustle he could find. Pumping gas for change, cutting yards, washing cars, sweeping lots, anything that put a few dollars in his hands. Music became his breath, his escape, his whole dream. He would freestyle with his day ones nonstop, battling anyone who thought they could step up, building a raw buzz in Nashville's underground scene before he even had a real studio session. But here's where things flip and show just how hungry and bold Buck really was. Buck and his homie stumbled across a CD from BG's Chopper City, and on the back of it was a phone number for Cash Money Records. These two young dudes didn't hesitate. They dialed that number with one of the wildest ideas ever. They straight up told Cash Money they wanted to book them for a show in Nashville for around $5,000. That's the kind of fearless move only someone starving for a breakthrough would even dream of trying. Even crazier, the booking actually went through, at least on paper. They pulled it off with no real plan, no industry backing, just pure hustle and nerve. The show itself never ended up happening, but what had go down that day changed Buck's entire life forever. That one phone call became the doorway to everything. The fame, the money, the alliances, the betrayal, the downfall, all of it. It was one of those moments where nobody in the room knew they were part of the first chapter of a story that would later shake hip-hop to its core.
Did happen was Buck and Lil Jimmy ended up meeting everybody at Cash Money Records, and the first thing that Birdman told Buck was to spit a freestyle for him, and he put him up against Lil Wayne at that time, and they went back and forth, and that ended up impressing Birdman.
What had happened that day was way crazier than any show they were trying to pull together. Buck and Little Jimmy actually ended up face-to-face with everybody at Cash Money Records, stepping right into a building most rappers only dreamed about entering. The moment they walked in, Birdman didn't waste a second. He looked at Buck and told him to spit a freestyle on the spot. Then he pushed him straight into a back and forth with Lil Wayne, and they went right at it like two young stars fighting for a spot under those neon lights. That moment shook Birdman so much that he brought Buck down to New Orleans almost immediately, hoping to lock him in and make something official. And that's where the weight of Buck's ambition hit another level. At just 14, he made a life-changing call. He dropped out of school completely to chase the music full-time. Nobody's here to judge whether that move was perfect or not, but it shows how locked in he was. This wasn't a hobby, this wasn't something to brag about to friends. Music was his whole escape, his one shot to flip his future, his entire ticket out the pressure he was born into. Buck rolled with Cash Money, hoping everything would fall into place and he'd finally build something real.
Buck ended up coming on with them and hopefully having his situation figured out as well. But as years went on, Buck said he spent 3 to 4 years with Cash Money and none of his music ever got released. He got essentially put on the back burner while the other artists on Cash Money like Lil Wayne, Juvenile, BG, so on and so forth ended up blowing up.
But as the years stretched on, his story turned into one of the most frustrating chapters of his career. Buck later said he spent 3 to 4 years around Cash Money and didn't get a single project released, not one. While Lil Wayne, Juvenile, BG, and the rest of the roster were blowing up, touring, charting, and building empires, Buck got pushed to the background like he wasn't even there. His entire run with them, the only physical proof he can show is his quick appearance in the Big Timers' Big Ballin' music video. That's it. That one scene is the only footage from years of grinding, traveling, writing, waiting, hoping, and being loyal. By 1999, Buck couldn't take it anymore. He was watching everybody around him shine while he stayed stuck behind the curtain with no real opportunity, and it crushed him. So he made the tough call. He left Cash Money, packed it up, and went right back to Nashville determined to build his own lane, his own sound, and his own future without waiting on anyone ever again. Those years at Cash Money weren't completely wasted. Not even close. Buck soaked up priceless game about how the music business really operated behind the curtains, learning the politics, the power moves, and the quiet conversations that never show up in interviews. On top of that, he made relationships that would later save his career, including linking with DJ Paul from 3 6 Mafia and connecting deeply with Juvenile, bonds that would end up being life-changing. When Buck went back to Nashville, he didn't cry about missed chances or sit around waiting for another label to magically show up. He locked in with his local squad and went straight into grind mode, pure independent hustle. No machine behind him, no fancy budgets, no industry push, just work, determination, and a hunger that couldn't be faked. On August 22nd, 2000, he dropped Thuggin' Till the End with his day one partner, D-Tay, and something wild happened. This independent project actually charted on Billboard. It hit number 34 on the US R&B charts and number 17 on the US independent charts, which was unheard of for an unknown rapper from Nashville working out the trunk. That was a major win for someone with no label, no connections pushing the album, and no radio machine behind it. Buck ended up moving around 10,000 units independently. And while that might not compare to big label numbers, for an independent artist grinding on his own, that was a serious bag and a serious statement. It proved that the dream wasn't just a hobby. People were listening, people were buying, and people actually cared about what he was saying. It showed him this music thing could really work. Then everything shifted with one moment, the wake-up call that forced him to choose his path for real.
And out of my ordeal back in the streets, I ended up getting shot in a home invasion and a robbery. One in the arm, one in the upper thigh area. It was enough for me to wake up and really realize that, yo, if this shit keep going on like this, I'm either to get killed or I'm gonna go to jail. And I really realized that because I was getting down for real. Really started to devote more of my time to the music then, the studio, period.
After recovering from getting hit during a home invasion robbery, Buck looked in the mirror and made a commitment to himself that he wasn't going back to the streets again. No more halfway living, no more split focus. It was music or nothing. And he was finally ready to bet everything on his talent. And right when he needed a break the most, one of his old Cash Money connections stepped up in a real way. DJ Paul from 3 6 Mafia, who had always respected Buck's skill and pen game, heard about the shooting and reached out immediately. He had Project Pat scoop Buck from Nashville and bring him down to Memphis to lay down some tracks, opening a door that would change the entire direction of Buck's life. Out of those Memphis studio sessions came Buck's first real breakthrough, his first major album placement. He landed on Memphis off 3 6 Mafia's When the Smoke Clears 66/61 album, and that track became the spark he needed. That placement put his name in rooms he had never been in before, giving him the kind of exposure that finally made people pay attention. Even with all that momentum, Buck still didn't sign with 3 6 Mafia though. He went right back to Nashville, pushing his movement independently. But now he had visibility, respect, and serious connections behind him. But hold up, the story gets even wilder, because the way Buck actually ended up joining G-Unit is a whole movie by itself. After that early 3 6 Mafia look, Buck's career was grinding forward, and then suddenly everything flipped again. Birdman, his old connect from Cash Money, reached back out with a new proposition, and this was a very different Cash Money than the one Buck had known years before. This was the upgraded version, bigger offices, luxury cars lined up, a whole empire in full motion. Birdman told Buck he wanted him in a brand new group he was building called Head Bussa. So Buck flew back to New Orleans thinking this might be the move that finally locks everything in. But the moment he got there, old patterns started creeping back in. Days went by with no paperwork, no meetings, no studio schedule, just waiting around with empty promises floating in the air. Buck wasn't a kid anymore. He was a grown man with real responsibilities and a career he needed to move forward, not sit still. Frustration started building because he had already lived this storyline once and he wasn't about to repeat the past. And then, out of nowhere, something crazy happened. Something that changed the whole direction of his life. Juvenile walked into the Cash Money office and stopped dead in his tracks when he saw Buck sitting there. He couldn't believe Buck was waiting around again, stuck in the same limbo he once experienced himself.
Juvie happened to pull up at the office, and when he pulled up, he was kind of shocked to see me there. I'm like, I've been here for a whole week. And he was like, man, you want to get up out of here for a minute? You know what I'm saying? And I took that ride with Juvie, and that's where my career started, with Juvenile.
At that time, Juvenile was going through his own issues with Cash Money, making moves and figuring out his next chapter. And once he realized Buck was still unsigned and still waiting, he didn't waste a second. He made Buck a real offer, right then and there. An offer backed by action, not empty talk, and Buck knew this was the kind of opportunity he couldn't let pass him up. From that moment forward, Buck officially joined Juvenile's UTP Records, stepping into a brand new chapter that would eventually open the door to G-Unit and everything that came with it. While Juvenile and 50 were in the back of the tour bus locking in on music, Buck made a sharp move that showed just how hungry and strategic he really was. Instead of sitting around waiting for a chance to be noticed, he started playing his own solo tracks for Lloyd Banks and Yayo, who were also chilling on the bus. One track in particular grabbed Lloyd Banks' attention instantly. The energy, the beat, the whole vibe had him locked in. Banks took that beat straight to the back of the bus where 50 was recording, and 50 ended up jumping on it, turning that track into Bloodhound, the same joint that later landed on the legendary Get Rich or Die Trying album. That moment wasn't just luck. That was Buck making sure he was impossible to ignore. Now, even though Bloodhound became the track that truly introduced Buck to the mainstream world, it wasn't technically the first joint with all four of them on it. That honor belongs to a little bit of everything off the 50 Cent is the Future mixtape. But Bloodhound, that was the one that lit Buck's name across the industry like a flare in the sky. At that time, 50 genuinely liked Buck. He saw the hunger, the grind, the talent, but he couldn't offer him a deal yet because 50 himself still wasn't signed to a major label. Even then, 50 didn't forget about Buck or the energy he brought. And when everything at UTP started falling apart exactly the way Buck expected, fate stepped in with a wild twist. Just 1 week after the UTP situation fizzled out, young Buck got a call from 50 Cent that changed everything. 50 told him, "We want that Bloodhound track, we'll pay you $20,000 for it." And then he told Buck something even crazier. The track was being mixed by Eminem and Dr. Dre. That was the type of moment rappers dream about but rarely ever get. But 50 wasn't done. He wanted to fly Buck out to Los Angeles to meet Eminem and Dr. Dre in person and officially sign him to G-Unit. For Buck, who had already faced setbacks, broken promises, false starts, and years of waiting around, this felt like destiny finally opening the right door for him. It was the opportunity every rapper in the early 2000s prayed for, and it landed straight in Buck's lap. Buck's first major placement on G-Unit Records became Bloodhound on Get Rich or Die Trying. But 50 had a strategy in mind that went deeper than just giving him a spot. Instead of rushing Buck's solo album, 50 decided to strengthen Buck's profile by releasing a G-Unit group project first, Beg for Mercy, a move designed to introduce Buck to the entire world as an official part of the squad, not just a feature. That one decision didn't just build momentum. It turned young Buck from an underground grinder into a recognizable force in hip-hop almost overnight. Beg for Mercy smashed the charts the moment it dropped, hitting number 2 on the Billboard 200 and moving 377,000 copies in its first week. Today, it's moved over 2.7 million units in the US alone and sits just below Diamond worldwide. And with that success, young Buck officially stepped into the biggest spotlight hip-hop could offer. The whole city back home was tuned in, watching his rise play out in real time. Following G-Unit's winning formula, Buck kept feeding the streets. On May 31st, 2004, he dropped his mixtape, Welcome to the Hood, hosted by DJ Woo Kid, building heavy buzz for his solo debut coming later that summer. Then on July 2nd, 2004, he dropped the first single, Let Me In, featuring 50 Cent, and it climbed to number 34 on the Billboard Hot 100. A huge look for an artist still building his solo name. Then came the life-changing moment. On August 24th, 2004, Buck released his debut album, Straight Outta Cashville, and the numbers were incredible. The project debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200 and sold 361,000 copies in its first week, an insane accomplishment for someone who just a few years earlier was grinding independently out of Nashville. The album quickly went platinum and stamped Buck as a real force in the game. The second single, Shorty Wanna Ride, became his highest charting solo hit ever, peaking at number 17 on the Billboard Hot 100. But beyond the commercial wins and the shiny plaques, Buck did something even bigger. He broke what people used to call the Nashville curse. For decades, artists from Nashville outside of country music struggled to break into mainstream success. But Buck tore that barrier down completely. He became the first hip-hop artist from the city to reach major national status, opening doors for a whole generation coming behind him. But then came the night that would follow him for years. On November 15th, 2004, at the Vibe Awards, things took a wild turn. Dr. Dre, Eminem, 50 Cent, Suge Knight, and the entire G-Unit camp were all there. A room full of heavyweights and high tension. A man named Jimmy Johnson allegedly put his hands on Dr. Dre, and chaos broke out instantly. In the middle of all the confusion, reports came out saying Young Buck allegedly used a sharp object during the altercation. Buck left the scene quickly as everything turned into a media storm. But a few days later, he turned himself in and let the legal process run its course. It took about a year and a half before the case finally wrapped up, and Buck received 3 years probation along with an order to complete 80 hours of community service. That moment didn't stop his career, but it definitely added a shadow that would follow him into the next chapter of his rise. That Vibe Award situation might have ended with light consequences on paper, but it was the first real warning sign. The first moment showing that Buck's street instincts and fierce loyalty could end up clashing with the industry world he was trying to dominate. It proved he could easily get pulled into chaos, even when he wasn't the one starting it, and that kind of energy can flip everything upside down fast. But Buck refused to slow down. In 2005, he kept pushing forward, stacking wins, and strengthening his brand. He jumped on 3-6 Mafia's massive hit, Stay Fly, which shot up to number 13 on the Billboard Hot 100 and eventually went double platinum. That track kept his name hot everywhere, from the radio stations to the block parties. At the same time, he dropped an independent album to promote future G-Unit South artists, because 50 had officially given Buck control of the entire G-Unit South movement. That meant Buck wasn't just an artist anymore. He was a leader, a businessman, and a gatekeeper building his own corner inside the G-Unit empire. He was creating something much bigger than himself. In 2006, Buck kept the streets flooded with mixtapes as he prepared for his next big project. On February 6th, he dropped Case Dismissed, the introduction of G-Unit South with DJ Drama, a project meant to celebrate the closing of his legal situation from the Vibe Awards incident and shine a spotlight on the new artist he was bringing under the G-Unit South banner. It was a statement that he was ready to move clean, focused, and powerful. But behind the scenes, trouble was brewing. Around the same time, Buck was putting together his second studio album, Buck the World. 50 Cent and their shared manager, Shaw Money XL, started having serious tension. Things got heated enough that 50 eventually called every G-Unit member together and told them straight they all needed new management because he was cutting ties with Shaw Money. And this is where Buck's biggest strength, loyalty, suddenly turned into a major risk.
Shaw Money had became a best friend of mine. I'm the best man on this man's wedding. That's how me and close Shaw was. Me and Shaw were probably closer than me and 50. Him and 50 was, so I'm the best man of this man's wedding. I'm judging Shaw not from a business standpoint of his problems with 50, but looking at him as my brother.
Buck and Shaw Money weren't just business partners, they were close. Buck had been the best man at Shaw Money's wedding, showing how deep that bond ran. So when 50 told everyone to drop Shaw Money immediately, Lloyd Banks and Yayo didn't hesitate. They followed 50's direction without argument. But Buck didn't move the same way. He didn't turn his back on Shaw Money, and in 50's eyes, that was a problem bigger than Buck realized. It set off a chain reaction that would change the chemistry of the entire crew and shift Buck's future inside G-Unit forever. Buck didn't look at Shaw Money XL like just a manager. He looked at him like family, like a real brother. And from Buck's point of view, there was no reason to cut ties with someone who had never crossed him. In his mind, whatever tension existed between 50 and Shaw Money was grown man business that would eventually get sorted out. Buck didn't see any logic in turning his back on someone who had supported him from day one. But 50 didn't see it that way, not even a little bit. To him, Buck refusing to drop Shaw Money looked like straight disloyalty, like Buck had picked a side, and that side wasn't his. The resentment kicked in immediately, and the energy around G-Unit shifted. Suddenly, the world started seeing Banks, Yayo, and 50 at shows, interviews, and appearances. But Buck and Shaw Money were out there promoting Buck's project by themselves. Buck later said he believes this was a huge reason why Buck the World didn't hit as hard as his debut. Instead of having the full G-Unit machine behind him like before, he was basically running his own war campaign with half the army missing. The album dropped on March 27, 2007, debuting at number 3 on the Billboard 200 with 140,000 first-week sales, solid numbers, and it eventually went gold. But it didn't match the monster success of his first project. The singles I Know You Want Me and Get Buck didn't chart the same way his earlier hits did either, and the tension behind the scenes made everything messier. At the same time, 50 started accusing Buck of being cool with people he considered his rivals. Names like The Game, Jadakiss, Fat Joe, Jim Jones, and others. Buck later clarified he wasn't building friendships with them at all. He was actually passing info to 50 about what they were saying. But even that wasn't enough to convince 50 he wasn't crossing a line. 50 also claimed Buck was tearing through money too fast, ignoring taxes, and that he personally covered Buck's taxes twice before refusing to step in a third time. Then came the moment that flipped everything. Buck found out he owed $300,000 to the IRS. That became a huge problem and set the stage for financial storms that would hit him even harder later. Then came the mess that made everything worse. Early 2008 was a rough time, especially January. Buck showed up to a performance with Lil Wayne and Birdman, and both of them publicly said Buck should leave G-Unit and come over to Young Money / Cash Money, and the wild part, Buck didn't shut it down. He actually appeared to agree with it while on stage. When 50 saw that footage, he was furious. By February 2008, things started becoming obvious to the fans. G-Unit dropped a new mixtape, Return of the Body Snatchers Volume 1, and Buck wasn't on it at all. That confused everybody because just months earlier, they dropped a track together called Feel Good, like everything was normal. But then came the moment that changed everything forever. The moment that sent Buck's entire world into a downward spiral he would spend years trying to climb out of. This was the beginning of the fall. The crash young Buck is still trying to recover from today. Everything spiraled after one moment that should have stayed private forever. Back in March 2008, 50 Cent and young Buck had a phone conversation that nobody knew about, except 50 was secretly recording the whole thing. That call was supposed to be a personal heart-to-heart, but instead it became a weapon that would blow their entire relationship apart. After that phone call, things seemed cool between them again. Buck even popped up on tracks for the G-Unit mixtape, Elephant in the Sand, that same month. For a small moment, it looked like the old chemistry might return, like the crew might actually find their balance again. Fans thought the storm was passing, and Buck thought he finally had some breathing room, but that peace didn't last long. In fact, it barely lasted at all. On March 20th, 2008, Yo Raps magazine released an interview with young Buck where he said, "I'm still waiting on a royalty check, period. I've never seen a royalty check since I've signed with G-Unit. So hell yeah, I'll tell you one damn thing, that show money is that good. I've never in my career cashed a royalty check." That shook the whole industry because it made G-Unit, especially 50, look shady. But here's the twist that makes this whole thing tragic. That interview was old, recorded months earlier when things were bad. The outlet chose to release it in March, right when Buck and 50 were finally patching things up. The timing wasn't just strange, it felt like straight sabotage. The next day, Shaw Money XL tried to do major damage control, denying the rumors and saying Buck had made over $10 million under 50's guidance. That was supposed to calm things down, but the fire was already spreading fast. Then came the Monday morning that flipped Buck's whole world upside down. April 7, 2008, 50 Cent called into Hot 97 and officially announced that Young Buck was no longer part of G Unit as a group. He made it clear Buck was still signed to G Unit Records as a solo artist, but as far as being in the crew, that door was shut. The following week, the entire G Unit squad pulled up to Hot 97, and 50 revealed even more details, including a claim that Buck had a drug problem causing him to act unpredictable. That accusation was huge, and it left fans confused, shocked, and wondering what was actually going on behind closed doors. Buck stayed silent for a few weeks, probably trying to process just how fast everything flipped on him. One minute, he's on top of the world, part of the biggest rap group on the planet. And the next minute, the crew is publicly pushing him out and putting his personal struggles in the spotlight. But Buck wasn't going to stay quiet forever. On May 12, 2008, he dropped a track called My Interview, where he responded to being kicked out of G Unit and addressed the drug allegations head on. It was emotional, raw, and full of hurt. The sound of an artist watching everything he built crumble right under his feet. Things stayed quiet for a moment until June, when Buck made the move that sealed his fate permanently. On June 15, 2008, Young Buck hit the stage and publicly said G Unit in front of a crowd. That wasn't just a comment. That was the point of no return, the moment where he drew a line in the sand and dared anyone to erase it. Just 2 days later, on June 17, 2008, 50 Cent fired back in the most brutal way possible. He dropped the full tape phone conversation where Buck was crying, asking him for help. It was one of the most shocking moments in rap history because nobody expected 50 to release something that personal, that emotional, and that damaging. The very next day, June 18th, Buck answered with a diss track called The Tape Conversation, and The Game even jumped on the remix to show support. A few days after that, on June 21st, rumors started circulating that Buck and Game were about to drop a joint mixtape called Worth More Than 50 Cent, but it never ended up happening. Then came July 1st, 2008, when G Unit released their second group album, Terminate on Sight. Buck was only featured on 4 tracks, basically treated like a guest on an album that was supposed to be his family's project. The message was loud and clear. He was in the building, but not part of the team anymore. For the rest of 2008, Buck's career slowed down heavy because, according to him, 50 Cent was blocking his ability to drop music. Since Buck was still legally signed to G Unit Records, 50 had the power to stop any official releases, and Buck said that's exactly what he did. With no other options, Buck chose the only path left. He started flooding the streets with mixtapes. And here's something real fans noticed. A lot of people say 2009 was Buck at his rawest, hungriest, most authentic. You could hear the pain, the frustration, the fire in every bar. He wasn't just rapping, he was fighting for his life through the mic. Tracks from that era sound like somebody trying to climb out of a hole with nothing but talent and pride holding them up. Buck dropped multiple mixtapes in 2009, including Back for the Streets on April 11th and the highly praised Back on My Buck on May 26th. Songs like I Want It All and I Got It featuring Young Jeezy showed a focused, motivated Buck, someone still capable of greatness even while his world was falling apart. But while he pushed forward musically, his personal and legal problems were stacking up at a terrifying rate. His life was spiraling. On August 3rd, 2010, the IRS raided Buck's home over more than $300,000 in unpaid taxes. During the raid, they found a firearm, and because Buck had a felony from the Vibe Awards situation, the charge hit him instantly, even after he said the gun belonged to his licensed tour manager. Just 3 days later, still covered in stress and chaos, Buck dropped a track called My Campaign, turning the IRS raid into music overnight. That was one of Buck's unique gifts. He could flip pain into bars instantly, like his life was one long freestyle. Then, on August 19th, 2010, Buck filed for Chapter 13 bankruptcy. And here's the part most people don't understand. This wasn't just desperation, it was strategy. The bankruptcy filing allowed Buck to finally break free from his G Unit Records contract. A smart play hidden inside a crisis. On September 7th, 2010, he dropped his independent album, The Rehab, which debuted at number 55 on the Billboard 200 and sold over 6,400 first-week copies. Decent numbers for an indie artist with no machine behind him, but nowhere close to the glory of his G-Unit days. Still, the project proved he wasn't finished. He was still swinging, even if the world kept throwing harder punches, but the legal storms wouldn't stop coming. In March 2011, G-Unit Records filed a massive $10 million lawsuit against Buck. Another blow, another battle, another mountain added to his already heavy load. Then came a strange moment that confused the whole rap world. Later in 2011, 50 Cent tweeted, "For some reason, I think Young Buck is mad at me." A message that was half joke, half taunt, and completely disrespectful. The whole internet felt the tension. It showed that whatever remained between them wasn't healing. It was just simmering, waiting to explode again. "Who cares? I'm giving my $250,000 back, sucker." That line became the spark for one of the darkest chapters in Young Buck's journey, and the chaos that followed showed how wild his life had really become behind the scenes. On March 4th, 2012, Buck survived a drive-by shooting outside a South Nashville club, and the situation got even worse when his girl was hit once in the shoulder during the attack. It was a terrifying moment that reminded everyone Buck was living in a world where danger wasn't theoretical. It was real and close. Then on July 13th, 2012, things took another heavy turn when Buck was officially sentenced to 18 months in prison on weapons charges. The following month, the IRS held a public auction to sell off his possessions: jewelry, studio equipment, personal items, everything. They collected around $53,000, but the whole event felt like a humiliating public display, a reminder of how far he had fallen from the platinum glow of his G-Unit days. Buck turned himself in August 2012 to begin his sentence, and after serving his time, he was released on October 2nd, 2013. And what happened next shocked the entire hip-hop world because nobody saw it coming. Behind the scenes, 50 Cent had been patching things up with Lloyd Banks and Yayo, and apparently Buck wasn't off his radar either. Then on June 1st, 2014, at Hot 97 Summer Jam, 50 Cent brought out all 3 original G-Unit members, and the crowd went crazy. It was an official G-Unit reunion, a moment fans had given up hope on years earlier. They dropped 2 EPs, The Beauty of Independence, August 25th, 2014, and The Beast is G-Unit, March 3rd, 2015, and both projects had serious heat. Fans finally felt like the old energy was back. During this period, Buck went into workhorse mode. He launched his ambitious 10 mixtape series, dropping projects like 10 Bullets, 10 Bricks, 10 Pints, 10 Bodies, and more between 2015 and 2018. His grind was undeniable, dropping tape after tape, proving he still had the talent, the hunger, and the focus to deliver raw storytelling and street-sharp lyricism. But the peace didn't last long because more legal issues kept hitting him. On July 15th, 2016, Buck was arrested over allegations involving threats toward an ex-girlfriend's apartment and ended up getting sentenced to 7 months behind bars. Another setback, another storm, another chapter where trouble seemed determined to find him. In 2018, things started looking brighter again. Buck dropped the single Can't Lose on March 30th, a powerful, motivational track that deserved way more attention than it received. He even announced that his next studio album would be executive produced by both 50 Cent and Dr. Dre, a massive headline that had fans excited for a real comeback. But once again, the relationship between him and 50 Cent fell apart. 50 claimed Buck owed him over $300,000 and began sending cease and desist notices to block anything Buck tried to release. It created a wall around Buck's career. Another one he couldn't break through without taking hits in every direction. Then came 2019, the year that threw gasoline on everything. Leaked audio surfaced of Buck in a private conversation with a transgender individual, and the situation immediately went viral. Instead of offering any kind of support or silence, 50 Cent publicly mocked the situation, posting disrespectful content and turning Buck into an online target. The moment was harmful, messy, and painful, and it showed how fractured the relationship had become. There was no going back. By 2020, the door to any possible future G-Unit reunion was completely shut. The tension, the embarrassment, The public humiliation and the financial battles turned a legendary partnership into something that felt permanently broken. Buck's story had gone from platinum success to battles on every front: legal, financial, personal, and emotional. And he was fighting to stay afloat while the world watched every mistake like a headline. Buck ended up filing for bankruptcy again, this time as a calculated move to break free from his contract and dodge the pressure from 50's lawsuit. It wasn't just desperation, it was strategy mixed with survival, a way to reset the board before the game crushed him completely. But after a long and ugly legal war, Buck finally lost the case in 2023 and agreed to pay $200,690 of the alleged $250,000 debt. That number alone would stress anybody out. To cover that and the rest of his financial mess, Buck had to liquidate a massive amount of assets, around $1.05 million worth. And out of that pile, almost $445,000 went straight to legal fees. After everything was paid out, he was left with roughly $600,000 for his creditors, showing just how heavy the situation had become and how deep the cuts went. Then in April 2025, the trouble came knocking again. Buck was arrested and sentenced to 30 days in jail for repeated violations of his bond supervision connected to his pending 2020 domestic assault case. It wasn't a long sentence, but it was another reminder that the past wasn't done chasing him yet. He was released around May 12, 2025, just trying to get his footing back while the next chapter of his legal situation loomed in the distance. His trial for that case has been pushed to January 12, 2026, and even though the situation is still hanging over him, Buck seems to be in a way better headspace. He's active online again, showing love to his supporters, celebrating milestones like the 18th anniversary of Straight Outta Cashville, and moving with a mindset that feels more focused, more grounded, and way more determined than before. Instead of drowning in old drama, Buck looks like he's trying to rebuild his legacy piece by piece, staying sharp, staying present, and refusing to let the past define his entire story. He's been through chaos, loss, and setbacks, but he's still standing, still pushing, and still trying to rewrite the ending his way. Young Buck's story isn't just a music journey. It's a full-blown saga of talent, chaos, resilience, and survival. He went from Nashville's rugged streets to G-Unit's platinum spotlight, from sold-out shows to courtrooms, IRS raids, public beefs, and headlines that would have folded most artists for good. But no matter how many times life tried to knock him out, Buck kept showing the same thing over and over. He don't quit. He's been hit with losses, lawsuits, betrayals, and moments where the whole world laughed instead of listened. But he's still here, still grinding, still dropping heat, still fighting to control his own name. Most people would have disappeared after the storms he lived through, but Buck used every setback like fuel, turning pain into music and music into movement. And that's what makes his story so wild. It ain't just the rise or the fall. It's the fact that every time he got counted out, he found a reason to push again. Even now, with legal battles waiting, financial scars still healing, and a reputation that's been dragged through every type of headline, Buck looks sharper, calmer, and more focused than ever. He's rebuilding slow, stacking piece by piece, and proving you can survive a broken past without letting it hold your future hostage. One thing is clear. Young Buck's legacy won't be defined by the darkest chapters, but by the fact that he never stayed down. His story shows the cost of loyalty, the danger of industry politics, and the strength it takes to keep moving when the world thinks you're finished. And trust, his next chapter is far from written. If you rock with stories like this, the raw truth, the messy history, the street-level reality behind hip-hop's biggest names, then stay locked in with BarzBuzz, because this is where the real stories live. Hit that subscribe, tap that like, and jump into another deep dive waiting on your screen right now. BarzBuzz isn't just reporting the culture. We're exposing it, decoding it, and bringing you the chapters nobody else has the guts to break down. If this saga had you shook, wait till you see what's next. You already know what it is. BarzBuzz got the real, raw, and unfiltered breakdowns. So don't forget to like and subscribe, drop a comment, and share this with someone who needs to catch up.